Welcome to Godless and Grounded. From the very beginning of human history, people have asked questions. Where did we come from? What happens after we die? Why do the sun and moon move across the sky? Why does the rain fall? And why do crops sometimes grow and sometimes fail? These questions were not just curiosity, they were matters of survival. If you could not explain the world around you, you were at its mercy. Ancient humans lived with fear every single day. They had no science, no technology, no knowledge of biology, physics, or astronomy. What they had instead was imagination. And with imagination came the invention of gods. When we look at the earliest human societies, we see that gods almost always represent forces of nature. The sun was a god because without it, crops would not grow. The moon was a god because it seemed to control the tides and the cycles of life. The storm was a god because thunder and lightning terrified people. Fire was a god because it could destroy everything, but also gave warmth and protection. In these cases, gods were not abstract ideas, but direct explanations. If something was powerful and mysterious, it was easier to give it a name, a personality, and a story than to admit ignorance. People did not know why the seasons changed, so they imagined gods of harvest and fertility. They did not know why disease struck, so they invented spirits of sickness or gods who punished human behavior. One of the strongest reasons humans invented gods is fear. Fear of death has always been the most powerful. Every living thing dies, but humans are the only creatures that know in advance that they are going to die. Imagine living in a prehistoric tribe, watching your parents or children die, seeing bodies decay, and knowing the same fate awaits you. That realization is unbearable. So people invented gods and an afterlife. Instead of death being the end, it was turned into a doorway. The dead, they said, live on in another world. Maybe in the sky, maybe under the ground, maybe in a paradise where there is no suffering. The idea of gods gave people comfort. It softened the pain of losing loved ones. It gave hope that existence had meaning beyond this short and fragile life. We can see this pattern across cultures. The ancient Egyptians filled their tombs with food, weapons, and treasures because they believed gods would guide the dead into another life. The Greeks believed in Hades, a shadowy underworld ruled by its own deity. The Hindus believed in reincarnation, with gods controlling the endless cycle of rebirths. Each culture invented its own version of gods and afterlife, but the reason was always the same. People could not accept the finality of death. Another important reason humans invented gods is the need for control. Life in early societies was unpredictable. Floods destroyed villages, droughts killed crops, plagues wiped out families, wars ended entire tribes. People wanted to believe that someone was in control. If a god ruled the world, then disasters were not random. They were punishments or lessons or signs. That made the chaos of life more bearable. Instead of facing a meaningless world, people could tell themselves that every event had purpose. If lightning struck your hut, maybe it was because a god was angry. If rain came after a ritual, it must mean the gods listened. Gods provided explanations when no other explanations existed. We can still see this pattern today. When something terrible happens, many people say, "It was God's will," or "Everything happens for a reason." It is the same psychological need. Accepting that disasters are random and without meaning is very difficult. Inventing gods fills that gap by offering order where there is none. Humans also invented gods for social reasons. In small tribes, rules could be enforced by elders or leaders. But as societies grew larger, laws needed stronger backing. Who could make sure everyone obeyed the rules when communities had thousands of people? That is where gods became useful. If people believed an all-seeing God was watching them, they were less likely to steal, kill, or betray others. The gods became invisible policemen, always present, always judging. Ancient rulers quickly realized this and tied their power to religion. Kings called themselves chosen by the gods. Priests claimed they alone could speak for the divine. This gave authority a sacred foundation. If you disobeyed the king or priest, you were not just breaking human law, you were offending the gods. This made societies easier to control. Think about the 10 Commandments in the Bible. Rules like do not steal or do not kill are simple laws any society would create, but attaching them to God made them unquestionable. If someone asked, "Why should I not steal?" the answer was not a debate about fairness or property. The answer was because God said so. This gave moral rules ultimate power. In this way, gods became tools for social order and political control. Another reason humans invented gods is storytelling. Human brains are wired for stories. We remember things better when they are in the form of characters and narratives. Instead of saying the sun rises and sets because the earth rotates, which early people did not know, they said, the sun is a god who rides a chariot across the sky. That story is easier to imagine and share. Gods gave faces and personalities to abstract forces. They turned the universe into a drama, with gods fighting, loving, punishing, and rewarding. These stories explained the world while also entertaining. Even today, people are drawn to myths because they are powerful stories that capture imagination. There is also the human need for belonging. Religion built around gods created shared rituals, festivals, and traditions. These strengthened communities. When people gathered to sacrifice to a god, they bonded with each other. When they prayed together, they felt united. Gods became symbols of group identity. Our God is different from your God, therefore we are different from you. This sense of belonging was important for survival. A tribe united by common gods was stronger against outsiders, but it also fueled conflict. Wars were fought not only for land, but for whose gods were greater. An interesting point is that the gods people invent often look like themselves. In ancient Greece, gods were basically humans with superpowers. They loved, fought, lied, and even made mistakes. In many cultures, gods are male, female, black, white, young, old, depending on who imagined them. This shows that gods are mirrors of human society. People project their own image onto the divine. Even in modern religions, God is often described as a father, king, or shepherd. These are human roles, not cosmic ones. The fact that gods always resemble human life is a strong sign that they were invented by humans. Gods also served as explanations for inner experiences. Before science, people did not know what dreams, emotions, or voices in the head meant. If someone heard voices, they thought it was a spirit or a god speaking. If someone had a dream, it was a message from the divine. Even today, people sometimes say they felt God's presence during emotional experiences. But neuroscience shows that these feelings come from the brain. Humans invented gods partly because they misinterpreted natural mental experiences. We also have to consider the role of hope. Life in ancient times was harsh. Most children did not survive to adulthood. Disease was everywhere. Violence was common. In such a world, believing in gods who could protect you or reward you after death was deeply comforting. Gods were invented to give people hope when reality was unbearable. Even today, people turn to gods when they are desperate. If someone is sick, they pray for healing. If someone is poor, they pray for wealth. Gods represent the possibility of help when human help is not enough. So when we ask why humans invented gods, the answer is not one single reason. It is many reasons. Fear of death, need for control, desire for social order, love of storytelling, sense of belonging, search for meaning, misinterpretation of experiences, hope in the face of suffering. All of these combined over thousands of years to create gods in every culture. We can see how gods evolve as human knowledge grows. Early gods explained natural forces like thunder and sun. Later gods became moral judges and lawgivers. In some traditions, gods became abstract ideas like universal love or cosmic order. As human societies changed, so did their gods. This again suggests that gods are human inventions, shaped by culture and history. Now let's pause and think about something important. If gods were truly real, we might expect them to be the same everywhere. But in reality, every culture invented different gods. Egyptians worshipped Ra, Greeks worshipped Zeus, Hindus worshipped Vishnu, Christians worship one god, Muslims worship Allah, and thousands of smaller religions worshipped spirits, ancestors, or animals. If a god were real, why would it not reveal itself clearly to all people in the same way? The diversity of gods shows that they are cultural creations, not universal truths. This is the heart of the matter. Humans invented gods because we are meaning-making animals. We cannot tolerate a meaningless universe. We cannot accept death as final. We cannot live in chaos without seeking patterns. Gods are the product of our imagination and our needs. They are answers we created when real answers were not available. And even today, when science explains much more of the world, gods remain. That is because the reasons humans invented gods are still part of us. We still fear death. We still seek meaning. We still want comfort and belonging. Gods survive because the psychological needs that created them still exist. When we think about why humans invented gods, we also have to look at how religion evolves. At first, it was about explaining the unknown, but later it became about organizing society. Over time, gods shifted from being local and small to being universal and all-powerful. In early cultures, each village or tribe might have its own small god or spirit. These were gods of rivers, trees, animals, or ancestors. But as societies grew into kingdoms and empires, those small gods were not enough. Rulers needed one great god who could unify all the people. This is how the idea of a supreme god developed. It was less about discovery and more about politics. A single god meant a single authority, one that could unite people under one law and one ruler. Consider the transition from polytheism to monotheism. In ancient Mesopotamia, people believed in many gods, each with specific roles. The god of storms, the god of the sun, the god of war, and so on. Over time, some gods became more important than others. Kings and priests promoted their own city's god as the most powerful. Eventually, this competition led to the idea that only one god mattered. The Hebrew people, for example, went from worshipping many gods to insisting that their god was the only real one. That was not because evidence appeared, but because it gave them a stronger cultural identity. Monotheism was a way to set themselves apart. It also made it easier to control followers, because if there is only one God, there is only one path, one truth, one authority. We also see that gods often reflect human fears and desires of their time. In societies where war was constant, gods of battle and victory were important. In societies focused on farming, gods of fertility and harvest dominated. In societies where disease was a threat, gods of healing appeared. This shows again that humans invented gods based on their needs. The gods of one time and place disappear when those needs change. For example, very few people today pray to the Greek god of the harvest, Demeter, because modern farming no longer depends on rituals. But people still pray to gods for health and wealth, because those needs remain. There is another powerful reason humans invented gods: the struggle with uncertainty. Humans dislike not knowing. If there is a gap in knowledge, our minds rush to fill it. This is called the God of the gaps. For every mystery, people inserted gods. Why does lightning strike? Because Zeus is angry. Why does a baby die suddenly? Because the gods willed it. Why do stars shine? Because they are eyes of the gods. This filled the gaps in human understanding. But the problem is, as knowledge grew, those gods shrank. We now know lightning is electricity, stars are burning spheres of gas, diseases have biological causes. The gods that once explained these things are no longer needed. Yet the habit of inventing gods for what we do not understand remains. Whenever there is a new mystery, some people still reach for divine explanations. Even in modern times, humans invent new forms of gods. Some invent conspiracy theories where hidden powers control the world. Some treat technology or celebrities like divine figures. The psychological pattern is the same. When we cannot understand, when we feel small, we imagine higher powers. This shows the invention of gods is not just about religion, but about how the human brain works. Another important factor is morality. Humans invented gods to give moral rules authority. If people believed rules were just human ideas, they might argue or reject them. But if rules were said to come from gods, they carried more weight. It is easier to say, "Do not kill because God commands it," than to argue complex reasons about society. This gave morality a supernatural foundation. Yet when we look closer, we see that human morality existed before religion. Small tribes had rules for cooperation long before written religions. Morality came first. Gods came later to justify it. The invention of gods gave moral rules a stamp of divine approval. We can also understand the invention of gods by looking at children. Children naturally invent invisible friends. They give names and personalities to stuffed animals, imaginary beings, and voices in their heads. This is not strange. It is how the human mind develops. We imagine unseen companions to explain the world and comfort ourselves. In many ways, gods are like cultural invisible friends. Societies kept these imaginations alive, passed them down, and added rituals to make them real. What begins as imagination becomes tradition, and what becomes tradition is treated as truth. If we look at history, we notice that gods change as human knowledge changes. Ancient people believed the sun itself was a god. Later, they believed a god created the sun. Today, we know the sun is a star formed by natural processes. The god keeps moving further away. Every time human knowledge advances, the gods retreat. But humans continue inventing new versions of gods to keep up. The god of the desert tribes becomes the universal god of the world. The god of storms becomes the god of heaven. The process never ends. This is why there are so many different versions of gods even within the same religion. Each generation reinvents God in its own image. We should also ask, why do some people hold on to gods even when evidence is lacking? The answer is that gods serve emotional needs more than rational ones. Humans invented gods not because the evidence was strong, but because the comfort was strong. Believing that a loving God cares about you, that your suffering has meaning, that death is not the end. These beliefs are deeply attractive. They ease fear, reduce anxiety, and make people feel important in a vast universe. Without gods, life can feel small and temporary. With gods, life feels grand and eternal. This psychological power is why gods remain, even when logic shows they are human inventions. Let us take a real-life example. When a child dies, parents naturally ask, why? Science may explain it as illness or accident, but that does not answer the deeper emotional question. Religion steps in and says, it was God's plan, or your child is in heaven now. These answers are not based on evidence, but they bring comfort. Humans invented gods because comfort sometimes matters more than truth. There is also the human desire for justice. In life, we see that good people often suffer while bad people prosper. This feels unfair. Humans invented gods and afterlives to fix this problem. If justice is not served in this world, it will be served in the next. The wicked will be punished in hell, the good rewarded in heaven. This makes people feel better about injustice, but when we think carefully, it is simply wishful thinking. It is an invention to make sense of unfairness. Another example is the way people pray before important events. Athletes pray before games, soldiers before battle, patients before surgery. This gives them a sense of control in uncontrollable situations. Even if the prayer does nothing, it calms the mind. This is another reason gods were invented. They gave people the illusion of control in a chaotic world. If we step back, we see that the invention of gods is not strange or foolish. It is a natural part of being human. Our brains are wired to seek patterns, find meaning, tell stories, and reduce fear. Gods are the result of these instincts. They are not proof of something outside us, but reflections of what is inside us. The invention of gods also explains why religions are so different. Each culture invented gods that match their environment and values. Desert tribes imagined strict gods of law and survival. Farming societies imagined generous gods of rain and fertility. Warrior societies imagined fierce gods of battle. The gods of one culture make little sense in another because they are products of their own context. This is strong evidence that gods are not universal beings, but local inventions. Even today, we can see new gods forming. Think of the way some people treat political leaders, celebrities, or even fictional characters. They are worshipped, celebrated, defended passionately, and surrounded with rituals. The human mind is still inventing gods, even if we do not call them that. This shows the process is ongoing. The invention of gods is not just ancient history, it is happening around us right now. So why do humans invent gods? Because we are human. Because we fear death. Because we crave meaning. Because we long for justice. Because we want comfort. Because we hate uncertainty. Because we love stories. Because we need community. Because we project our own image onto the universe. Gods exist because we invented them. They exist in the mind, not in reality. And perhaps that is the most important insight. Gods tell us less about the universe and more about ourselves. When we study the gods humans have invented, we are really studying human psychology, human hopes, human fears. Gods are mirrors in which humanity sees its own reflection. At the end of the day, the invention of gods is one of the greatest stories ever told. It shows the creativity of the human mind, but also its vulnerability. It shows our ability to imagine beyond what we see, but also our struggle to face reality as it is. Gods are our own creation, born out of the same imagination that gave us art, music, and science. The difference is that science looks outward to discover the universe, while gods look inward to soothe the human heart. And that is why humans invented gods.